Will Britain return the resources and precious items it looted from other nations? Britain has looted from many countries, and African nations were its favorite targets for looting. Not only that, Britain did the unthinkable torture of Africans as well.
I was beaten, my father was beaten, everybody in the camp. I think those camps was just a torture station.
In a surprising move, Kenya has taken a stand after years. The Mau Mau movement in Kenya has demanded that Britain pay $2.2 trillion for the loot and exploitation they inflicted. This has left Britain feeling embarrassed and trying to hide its face. The big question now is, will Britain pay this massive amount? And why is Kenya asking for such a substantial sum? What is Britain hiding from all of us? Let's find out. The Mau Mau movement in Kenya demands a substantial sum of $2.2 trillion as reparations from Britain. The demand is linked to the colonial crimes committed by Britain during the colonial period in Kenya. But before we talk about the demand and its reaction, let's first talk about the Mau Mau itself. The Mau Mau movement, which gained prominence in the 1950s, responded to Kenya's oppressive British colonial rule. The Kikuyu ethnic group spearheaded this resistance, fueled by a deep-seated desire for independence. The movement's roots can be traced back to the dissatisfaction among the local population with the exploitative policies and practices enforced by the British colonial administration. At its core, the Mau Mau movement aimed to secure independence for Kenya from British colonial rule. The Kikuyu leaders and supporters sought to reclaim their autonomy and establish a sovereign nation. The movement was not only a political struggle but also a manifestation of the broader aspirations of the Kenyan people for self-determination, dignity, and control over their destiny. Guerrilla warfare played a significant role in the Mau Mau movement's strategy against the British authorities. How did the Mau Mau movement employ guerrilla warfare as a strategy? Recognizing the military strength of the colonial forces, the movement opted for unconventional tactics to level the playing field. Mau Mau fighters engaged in hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and other guerrilla tactics, utilizing the terrain to their advantage. This approach allowed them to disrupt British control and maintain a sustained resistance. Protests were a vital component of the Mau Mau movement, serving as a non-violent means to express dissent and mobilize support. The movement organized demonstrations, marches, and public gatherings to voice opposition to British colonial rule. These protests were a show of strength and a way to garner international attention and support for the Kenyan cause. The resilience of the protesters reflected the depth of their commitment to achieving independence. Acts of civil disobedience were another crucial strategy employed by the Mau Mau movement. The protesters deliberately violated colonial laws and regulations to challenge the legitimacy of British authority. By refusing to comply with oppressive policies, the movement aimed to disrupt the normal functioning of the colonial administration and demonstrate the illegitimacy of their rule. Civil disobedience served as a powerful tool in the arsenal of the Mau Mau movement, highlighting the lengths to which they were willing to go in their pursuit of freedom. But what challenges did the Mau Mau movement face during its resistance? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The Mau Mau movement faced numerous challenges during its resistance against British colonial rule. The well-equipped colonial forces, with superior military strength, posed a formidable obstacle. The movement had to contend with the direct military confrontation and the economic and political pressures exerted by the colonial administration. Additionally, internal divisions and conflicts within the Kikuyu community and among other ethnic groups challenged the movement's unity and effectiveness. How did the British authorities respond to the Mau Mau movement? The British authorities adopted a repressive approach to quell the resistance in response to the Mau Mau movement. They implemented harsh measures, including declaring a state of emergency in 1952. The British military carried out widespread arrests, detentions, and torture of suspected Mau Mau members. The colonial administration also targeted Kikuyu villages, employing scorched earth tactics to destroy the infrastructure and support base of the movement. These brutal measures were intended to suppress the resistance and maintain British control over Kenya. The Mau Mau movement was pivotal in shaping the path to Kenyan independence. While the resistance was met with severe repression from the British authorities, it garnered international attention and sympathy for the Kenyan cause. The movement's persistence and sacrifices ultimately contributed to the weakening of British colonial resolve. 1960, the British government initiated constitutional reforms, signaling a shift towards self-governance. The momentum generated by the Mau Mau movement set the stage for negotiations, leading to Kenya gaining independence in 1963. The Mau Mau movement is significant in Kenyan history as a symbol of resistance and the struggle for independence. The sacrifices made by the movement's leaders and supporters are commemorated and remembered as a testament to the resilience of the Kenyan people in the face of colonial oppression. The movement's legacy is enshrined in national narratives, museums, and memorials that highlight the importance of the struggle for independence in shaping the identity of modern Kenya. Mau Mau people are still working to this day. Now, why are the Mau Mau people demanding reparations from Britain? The Mau Mau people's demand for reparations from Britain is deeply rooted in the enduring impacts of colonialism on their community. And the colonial period, marked by exploitation and oppression, left a lasting legacy that continues to affect the Mau Mau people today. The demand for reparations calls for addressing historical injustices and seeking redress for the profound social, economic, and cultural consequences inflicted upon the community. Colonialism profoundly impacted the Mau Mau people, leading to the loss of resources and rights that were integral to their way of life. The British colonial administration implemented policies that favored the interests of the colonial powers, often at the expense of the indigenous population. The land was forcibly taken away, disrupting traditional livelihoods and depriving the Mau Mau people of their ancestral territories. Additionally, economic exploitation further exacerbated their loss of resources, as valuable natural assets were exploited for the benefit of the colonial powers. The suffering endured by the Mau Mau people during the colonial period is a central factor motivating their demand for reparations. The atrocities committed by the British authorities, including torture, imprisonment, coerced labor, and violence, left indelible scars on the community. The psychological, physical, and emotional toll of these experiences has had intergenerational impacts, shaping the collective memory and identity of the Mau Mau people.
The history of what happened to the Mau Mau in Kenya during the 1950s at the hands of the British is a very sorry and distressing tale. It is, however, a tale that has to be told, if we as the British people are to learn from the mistakes of the past.
The demand for reparations represents a recognition of the deep and lasting wounds inflicted upon the community during the colonial era. The demand for reparations from Britain reflects the Mau Mau people's desire for acknowledgement of the historical injustices they suffered under colonial rule. Seeking reparations is about addressing the tangible losses and obtaining a formal acknowledgement of the wrongs committed against the community. It is a call for the recognition of the systemic injustices, human rights abuses, and cultural disruptions imposed by the colonial administration on the Mau Mau people. Acknowledgement is seen as a crucial step towards healing and reconciliation. The demand for reparations is fundamentally a dream of justice by the Mau Mau people. The injustices perpetrated during the colonial period, including the loss of resources and rights and the infliction of immense suffering, demand a response that goes beyond mere acknowledgement. Reparations are viewed as a means of rectifying historical wrongs and providing a form of restitution to the Mau Mau community. The pursuit of justice through reparations is an assertion of the Mau Mau people's rights to dignity and self-determination, and a fair and equitable resolution to the enduring consequences of colonialism. The demand for reparations is tied to the Mau Mau people's quest for recognition on the global stage. By seeking reparations, the community aims to bring attention to the historical injustices they endured and to assert their place in the narrative of colonial history. Recognition is about acknowledging past wrongs and the resilience, identity, and agency of the Mau Mau people. The demand for reparations symbolizes reclaiming agency and ensuring the community's voice is heard and respected. The demand for reparations by the Mau Mau people contributes to the ongoing discussions on colonial legacies and restitution. It adds a contemporary dimension to the dialogue surrounding the responsibilities of former colonial powers in addressing the consequences of their past actions. The demand becomes part of a broader global conversation on the need for restitution, justice, and accountability for historical injustices. It prompts reflection on the role of colonial legacies in shaping current disparities and emphasizes the importance of addressing these issues to build a more equitable future. What are some personal stories of Mau Mau veterans and their experiences? Grace Wanu, a Mau Mau veteran, recounted harrowing experiences from her time in detention camps, providing a first-hand account of the brutalities endured during the resistance against colonial tyranny. Her narrative unfolds with vivid descriptions of the torture she and her fellow Mau Mau members faced within the camps. Grace Wanu's testimony sheds light on the physical and psychological toll exacted by the British authorities, emphasizing the human cost of the struggle for independence. Cyprian Mutia, another Mau Mau veteran, shared poignant stories reflecting the profound personal losses experienced during the colonial period. His account details the heart-wrenching moments of losing family and friends as a direct consequence of the resistance against colonial rule. The narrative highlights the sacrifices made by individuals like Cyprian Mutia, who not only faced the brutality of the British authorities, but also endured the profound grief of losing loved ones in the pursuit of freedom. Mayam Wanji's personal story as a Mau Mau veteran reveals the unimaginable acts forced upon individuals within the detention camps. Her testimony unveils the extent of the physical and mental coercion employed by the British authorities. Mayam Wanji's narrative serves as a stark reminder of the dehumanizing tactics used to break the spirit of the Mau Mau resistance. The recounting of such acts highlights the inhumane methods employed in an attempt to quash the determination of those fighting against colonial oppression. How do the personal stories of Mau Mau veterans, such as Grace Wanu, Cyprian Mutia, and Mayam Wanji, illuminate the human cost of the resistance? The personal stories of Mau Mau veterans, including Grace Wanu, Cyprian Mutia, and Mayam Wanji, provide a poignant glimpse into the human cost of the resistance against colonial tyranny. These narratives go beyond the historical accounts, offering a deeply personal and emotional perspective on the toll exacted by the Mau Mau movement. The stories illuminate the physical and emotional scars borne by individuals who face torture, loss, and unimaginable acts in their quest for independence. By sharing these experiences, the veterans highlight the sacrifices made by individuals and communities to pursue a liberated Kenya. How does the demand for reparations go beyond seeking financial compensation for Mau Mau veterans? For Mau Mau veterans, the demand for reparations transcends a mere quest for financial compensation. While acknowledging the economic impact of colonial oppression, the demand symbolizes a broader and more profound desire for redress. It encompasses recognizing that the injustices inflicted upon the Mau Mau community go beyond measurable economic losses. The demand reflects a holistic approach to addressing the multifaceted consequences of colonialism, including the social, cultural, and psychological toll exacted on the veterans and their communities. The demand for reparations symbolizes Mau Mau veterans' profound desire for recognition. Beyond material restitution, the veterans seek acknowledgement of the historical injustices and the trauma they endured during the resistance against colonial rule. The demand becomes a plea for the world to bear witness to the suffering and sacrifices of the Mau Mau community. Recognition is essential to validating the veterans' experiences and ensuring their contribution to the struggle for independence is acknowledged and respected. The demand for reparations expresses the Mau Mau veterans' pursuit of justice. It signifies a commitment to addressing the wrongs committed during the colonial period and seeking a fair and equitable resolution. In this context, justice goes beyond legal considerations. It encompasses the moral and ethical imperative to rectify the historical injustices inflicted upon the Mau Mau community. The demand reflects a collective determination to hold accountable those responsible for the systemic torture, loss, and suffering endured by the veterans and their fellow resistance members. The demand for reparations is a poignant acknowledgement of the trauma experienced by Mau Mau veterans. It recognizes the deep scars left by the systematic torture, imprisonment, and loss endured during the colonial period. By seeking reparations, the veterans articulate the enduring impact of the trauma on their lives and the lives of their communities. The demand becomes a way of giving voice to colonial oppression's psychological and emotional toll, emphasizing the need for healing and restitution beyond the visible and tangible aspects of the struggle. How does the demand for reparations represent a commitment by Mau Mau veterans to rectify past injustices? The demand for reparations represents a clear commitment by Mau Mau veterans to rectifying past injustices. It signifies a collective determination to address the historical wrongs committed during the colonial period and to bring about a meaningful resolution. By seeking reparations, the veterans articulate their belief in acknowledging and redressing the injustices inflicted upon their community. The demand becomes a call for corrective action, emphasizing the necessity of reconciling the past to build a more equitable and just future. The demand for reparations is, at its core, a plea for the restoration of dignity by Mau Mau veterans. The systematic torture, loss, and suffering endured during the colonial period were not only physical but also deeply dehumanizing. Seeking reparations becomes a way for the veterans to reclaim their dignity, which was eroded by the oppressive actions of the colonial regime. The demand symbolizes a quest for recognition beyond financial compensation, aiming to restore the dignity of individuals and communities who fought valiantly for their right to self-determination. The demand for reparations reflects a broader commitment by Mau Mau veterans to ensuring a just and equitable future. The veterans seek to create a foundation for healing, reconciliation, and social transformation by addressing the historical injustices through reparations. The demand becomes a catalyst for societal awareness and change, emphasizing the importance of learning from the past to build a future that upholds the principles of justice, dignity, and human rights. This way, the demand for reparations becomes a forward-looking and transformative effort for Mau Mau veterans and their communities. What is the urgency for reparations according to the Mau Mau veterans? The urgency for reparations, as emphasized by Mau Mau veterans, is closely tied to their current life stage, with many of them in their twilight years. The advancing age of the veterans highlights a race against time to address historical injustices before the generation directly impacted by colonial oppression fades away. The veterans, having endured the traumas of the resistance against colonial tyranny, recognize the importance of seeking redress during their lifetime, ensuring that their stories are heard, acknowledged, and addressed before it's too late. The urgency for reparations extends beyond the Mau Mau veterans themselves to encompass the well-being of their families. In their twilight years, the veterans are acutely aware of the burdens their families bore due to the historical injustices endured during the colonial period. Seeking reparations becomes a means of alleviating the intergenerational impact of the trauma, loss, and suffering experienced by the veterans. The urgency reflects a desire to secure a more just and stable future, not only for the veterans but also for their families, who continue to grapple with the consequences of colonial oppression. A palpable race against time characterizes the urgency for reparations for Mau Mau veterans, the veterans in their twilight years. The window of opportunity to address historical injustices is narrowing. The urgency stems from the recognition that the veterans, who played a pivotal role in the resistance against colonial rule, may not be present to witness the acknowledgement and redress they seek. As time elapses, the urgency becomes a reminder of the imperative to act swiftly and decisively to ensure justice is served before the remaining witnesses to history pass away. The urgency for reparations is closely tied to the pressing need to preserve the oral history of the Mau Mau movement. With Mau Mau veterans in their twilight years, their first-hand accounts and experiences are invaluable to the historical narrative. Seeking reparations becomes not only a quest for justice, but also a means of preserving the oral history that might be lost with the passing of the veterans. The urgency reflects a commitment to capturing and documenting the lived experiences of those who fought against colonial oppression, ensuring that their stories continue to resonate with future generations. So Kenya is making the Britons realize and accept what they did. Apart from this, what other initiatives is Kenya pursuing related to its cultural heritage? Kenya is actively engaged in initiatives to restate its cultural heritage, particularly focusing on returning stolen artifacts during the colonial era. The country has undertaken diplomatic efforts and advocacy campaigns to reclaim its cultural treasures with significant historical, spiritual, and artistic value. These initiatives are part of a broader global movement, urging former colonial powers and museums to repatriate artifacts taken without consent during periods of colonization. As part of its cultural heritage restitution efforts, Kenya is seeking the return of a diverse range of artifacts that hold cultural, spiritual, and historical significance. The items include stolen skulls, stone sculptures, ceremonial artifacts, and weapons. These objects are valuable in a historical context and carry profound cultural and spiritual meaning for the communities from which they were taken. The restitution efforts aim to repatriate these artifacts, allowing them to be rightfully reintegrated into the cultural and religious practices of the communities to which they belong. The Mau Mau freedom fighters actively support the restitution of cultural heritage in Kenya, aligning their cause with the broader initiative to reclaim stolen artifacts. Having experienced the harsh realities of colonial oppression, the Mau Mau movement recognizes the importance of preserving and honoring its cultural heritage. The support from the Mau Mau freedom fighters is particularly evident in their advocacy for the return of specific items, such as skulls, stone sculptures, ceremonial objects, and weapons. These artifacts are not only seen as cultural treasures, but also hold spiritual significance in the rituals and ceremonies of the Mau Mau community. Kenya's efforts to reclaim its cultural heritage through restitution align with broader global movements advocating for returning artifacts taken during colonial periods. Many countries once subjected to colonial rule actively sought the repatriation of cultural treasures, asserting their rights to these items and emphasizing the importance of preserving their cultural identity. The global movement aims to challenge the historical injustice of cultural looting and foster a more equitable distribution of cultural heritage by returning stolen artifacts to their countries of origin. The restitution of cultural heritage plays a pivotal role in preserving Kenya's cultural identity. Reclaiming stolen artifacts represents a tangible effort to reconnect with the country's rich history, traditions, and spiritual practices. These cultural treasures hold immense significance for communities in Kenya, serving as tangible links to their past and contributing to a sense of continuity and pride. The restitution efforts are not only about recovering physical objects, but also about revitalizing and safeguarding the intangible cultural heritage that defines the identity of the Kenyan people. Do the restitution efforts for cultural heritage reflect a commitment to decolonization? The restitution efforts for cultural heritage in Kenya reflect a broader commitment to the principles of decolonization. By reclaiming stolen artifacts, Kenya asserts its sovereignty over its cultural resources and challenges the legacy of colonial exploitation. The movement for restitution aligns with the broader global discourse on decolonization, which seeks to address historical injustices, empower formerly colonized nations, and reshape narratives around cultural heritage. The restitution of cultural artifacts becomes a concrete step in dismantling the remnants of colonial dominance and affirming the agency of nations in preserving and interpreting their cultural histories. Do you believe Britain will pay the $2.2 trillion that Kenya has requested? What if other nations also asked for compensation for the loot? Could Britain go bankrupt? Let us know in the comment section if Kenya took the right stand. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.